Then they ask a very young girl, so you don't go to school? She said, no, I cannot go to school. My South African classmates are going to kill me. My father told me that I will only study when we reach Zimbabwe, when we go home. That's the only time I can study. If I try to study in South Africa, the South Africans are going to kill me.
I think just raising a number of things that I think from a SAFIS perspective would be interesting to think about how we build on them so that they become part of the conversation. I mean, even, as part of the conversation around how to, I think, to build what we develop and have continued to refer to as a living document. Because for us, the declaration, there's certain things that shouldn't change because those are like core principles. But I think the rest of it has to be modified and redefined as we develop our own analysis. And I think clarify our perspective in terms of how power is working or not working in the world. So I think all the points made and the critiques, in fact, one of the things I wanted to ask Noor and others who maybe just saw the document now is whether they could send us the notes on some of the things that they would like us to think about in relation to this.
So what do I mean when I say that I think there isn't much contradiction between South Africa's domestic and international policy? There is obviously a kind of rhetorical disjuncture, but first of all I'd like to say that I don't think this is specific to South Africa. I think that if you take the example of different levels of discourse and contextual rhetorics when it comes to immigration matters, I think they are sort of intrinsic to international relations. And if you take the example of the European Union and Africa, for instance, I think you'll find exactly the same kind of contradictions. Let's call them contradictions for now. I think if you take the example of a country like, for instance, France, and let's not take Africa this time, but Europe, with the enlargement. France is, with Germany, obviously has been the leading force in the European Union process, and at the same time, if you look at the way in which it's treating Roma at the moment, on its own territory, you can see exactly the same kind of double standards and double rhetorics. The second point which I'd like to make is that in terms of South Africa's regional policy when it comes to migration and people's movement, there too I think that there is more coherence than perhaps first meets the eye. If you think of this whole moral debt paradigm that was very much supported by President Mbeki back in the mid-1990s and early 2000s, and if you think of the free movement paradigm, I think that South Africa has moved away from this for a long time. South Africa's actually...
Now, making that point at the beginning, because I do think that all the problems that we've been confronting around xenophobia will in fact increase over the next period in the context of how the country attempts to deal with this supposedly big problem of the young unemployed. The second issue I want to raise is about, where we locate the kind of civil society activism, and I just want to echo, perhaps with a slightly different inflection, the point that was made earlier. I think that one needs to sort of shift, not away from, a sort of human rights-based approach, which I think is absolutely critical to thinking about the kind of activism.
What we have been observing since 2008 or before, the aggression at a societal level towards non-nationals, the recurrent attacks linked to what we were saying around the capability of the ANC and government to mobilize. Would we say, is this an outcome of their capacity to mobilize the society? Hence we're seeing this convergence of views and societal aggression towards non-nationals linked to their policy framework. And what would that mean if we say or suggest that the victory or the election, or we say the deployment of Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma to the African Union can be interpreted as the the victory for South African government or the society.
And I want to take away, or rather sort of think about the issue of, you raised it as the moral debt, right? Because the idea that the anti-apartheid struggle was a global struggle featured in the course of the discussions. Why South Africa Forum for International Solidarity?
That we have to be moving with what our reality is. Is it in keeping and in time and in step with what the realities are that are facing workers? Because the danger of how we orientate to then looking towards those movements supposedly to be our solutions and allies in these forms of movement building can be some of the dangers. I think it's a time where we have to be quite brutal in understanding, like we're saying, let's look at the consistencies. These policies are consistent.